Okay, so let's get started by talking a little bit about the Treaty of Versailles. In the wake of the German defeat, on November 28, 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated as the King of Prussia and Emperor of Germany. His abdication was designed to put Germany in a better negotiating position with the victorious democracies. The final pressure for his abdication came from General Paul von Hindenburg. The Weimar Republic was first proclaimed on November 9, 1918, by a new alliance of liberals and socialists. They would be at the negotiating table at the Paris Peace Conference. For the Treaty of Versailles, France demanded terms that would have completely deindustrialized and demilitarized Germany. The French floated proposals that included breaking up Germany proper and creating a client state in the industrial Rhineland. France demanded harsh reparations for the damage done to its country and Belgium during the conflict. Ultimately, Germany was forced to pay $31 billion in reparations under the treaty. Italy did not receive territory promised in secret deliberations during the war. The emerging League of Nations lacked the teeth needed to prevent an aggressive power from emerging and destroying the fragile peace. Rather than creating a series of independent democracies across Eastern Europe and the Middle East, conflict raged for years, leading to opportunities for Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Russia. Furthermore, the United States never signed the Treaty of Versailles and did not join the League of Nations. The United States Senate never ratified the treaty, destroying Woodrow Wilson's grand vision. German propaganda had been announcing for months that their soldiers were very close to victory through much of 1918, and in many ways they had been. The shock of defeat, coupled with the harsh terms proposed, carved an indelible mark in the German psyche. This unexpected defeat led to the famous stab in the back theory that was utilized by Hitler. The sight of American, British, French, and Belgian soldiers occupying the Rhineland pierced the brief calm after the fighting ended. Furthermore, Germany's acceptance of Article 231, commonly referred to as the War Guilt Clause, was for many the final straw. Germany had to accept the full responsibility for the war, including the actions of its allies. This came at a heavy price. Across its territory, various portions were carved off or plebiscites prepared. Germany lost all of its overseas colonies. France gained Alsace-Lorraine and its resources and industry lost in the Franco-Prussian War. France also occupied the Saarland, which was rich in coal. Votes were held in other regions, with Poland gaining territory in both Prussia and Silesia. Perhaps most insulting was the Allied requirement that Poland had access to the sea, creating a strip that divided Germany into two. The predominantly German-speaking city of Danzig became a free city. The treaty required Germany to disarm. German troops were not allowed in the Rhineland, Germany's main industrial region that bordered France. Furthermore, the Reichswehr was limited to just 100,000 soldiers. The Air Force was banned from having combat aircraft, and the German Navy lost most of its surface ships and all of its submarines. Tanks were forbidden. What had arguably been the strongest army in the world was humiliated for a second time. The Treaty of Versailles hung heavily on the German consciousness almost immediately. Rather than fostering long-term peace and stability, the Versailles Treaty's main goal of handling Germany instead sparked movements that would lead directly into World War II. As the Germans saw it, for 4 long years they fought bravely, lost 2 million men, and then surrendered. The country was in shambles, the emperor was toppled, and was replaced by a weak democracy, the Weimar Republic. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to find a government that was set up to fail more than the Weimar Republic. The nation of Germany was humiliated, with harsh terms of surrender, including the Allied demand for Germany to pay costly war reparations, which they only finished paying off in the 21st century. The economy was horrible, people needed jobs, and inflation wiped out savings. Now, just to get a sense of kind of how inflation worked, let's take a look at bread. Bread is, kind of an ordinary product, right? And I'm putting up a chart here just to kind of help explain along with the numbers. So in 1914, in Germany, a loaf of bread cost about 13 cents. And I'm going to say cents and dollars, even though it would have been the German currency. So in 1914, it cost about 13 cents for a loaf of bread. During the war, about 19 cents. That might be expected given that Germany was under a blockade, right? 1918, it's up to 22 cents. And the next year, 1919, 26 cents. So in just about 5 years, the price of bread doubled. 1919, of course, is when the Treaty of Versailles took effect. So, 1920, the price of bread was up to $1.20. The next year, $1.35. The next year after that, $3.50. So it's doubled over the course of a year. January 1923. 1923, things are going to get really out of hand. In January 1923, a loaf of bread cost 700 marks. And then in June, see, I've switched over to the currency. In June, it cost 1,200 marks. So 6 months in, it's up 500 marks. September, end of the summer, 2 million marks. October, 670 million marks. The beginning of November 1923, a loaf of bread cost 3 billion marks. 3 billion, with a B. And then 2 weeks after that, November 15th, 100 billion marks. That's just for bread. That's the kind of inflation we're talking about. Money was basically worthless. You'd see people using bricks of money in the place of building blocks. Like instead of Legos, your kids would just play with stacks of money. People would use bricks of money to burn in their fireplace as like fuel to keep them warm and to fuel their stoves for cooking. You know, it takes a wheelbarrow of money just to buy an essential item like bread. People are hurting. Now, this is not to excuse electing or voting for Hitler and the Nazis, but it does give us a sense of just how desperate many people were, and how a would-be tyrant like Adolf Hitler could capitalize on that fear and uncertainty. In the midst of this economic uncertainty, German veterans formed into armed militias called Stahlhelm, steel helmets. This militia helped lead to further undermine the unstable Weimar government. In 1920, a new political party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, organized in Germany to take on the Weimar Republic. The combination of this new political party combined with militias led to emerging communist and National Socialist conflict. And it's in this instability that Hitler would take power. A fringe movement claiming to be the champion of the oppressed emerged. They dressed in intimidating brown shirt uniforms, roamed the streets in gangs, and wanted to restore national pride. Calling themselves the National Socialists or Nazis, their leader was Adolf Hitler. The natural base for the Nazi Party was in Munich. Munich was the capital of Bavaria, known for conservative and nationalistic passions. Nazi street gangs violently attacked Jews and communists. In 1923, in the height of this bread inflation, in a beer hall, the original Nazi leadership gathered followers. They were impatient and eager to take power. In the middle of this meeting, Adolf Hitler waved a pistol and called for a revolution to begin. Hitler led the revolutionaries into the streets, planning an overthrow of the government. The revolt failed. Police crushed it and sent Hitler to jail. And that's that, right? End of story. It would seem that Germany's fascist movement was over before it could start. Unable to overthrow the government by force, Hitler resolved to take it by political means. While he was in prison, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, which preached his message of uniting all ethnic Germans and giving them more space to live. Mein Kampf is not the best read. It had grammar issues, it's kind of hard to read. Most people in Germany kind of gave up after maybe 10 or 20 pages. However, in it, Hitler laid out the points of the fascist future. Hitler argued that democracy didn't work. It was a flawed system that could be manipulated by outside forces for their own gain. Hitler blamed communists and ultimately blamed Jews for everything wrong with the world, and he had a solution for that. The solution was fascism or National Socialism. He could make Germany strong, he could unite the country, and he could unite the master race and get Germany back to a rightful status. Now, Hitler was in prison, but he was tapping into ideas that had begun percolating around Europe. Once he was out of prison, Hitler played on many of the same themes as Mussolini, rousing a disillusioned workforce, reviving a struggling economy, and fixing what was considered a weak government. At first, the boom times of the Roaring Twenties blunted his populist message, But then the Great Depression hit in 1929, working masses were angry again, and Hitler's promises gained traction. Hitler promised jobs to everybody, and of course people needed jobs. That was exactly what they wanted to hear. Hitler promised the people everything they wanted. He promised them a bright future, he promised them work, he promised them Lebensraum, or living space. Hitler was a powerful, mesmerizing speaker. People were taken in by Hitler's speech, not so much by the beauty of his arguments, but by the sheer fanaticism, by his anger, by his rage, and his repetitive rhetoric. And people, eyewitness accounts, describe his speeches as having a barbaric, primitive effect. What he was telling people was horrible, but the performance he delivered was a big artistic show. He repeated a lie endlessly, and it wasn't a small lie, it was a big lie, and he kept hammering it into their heads. He also dumbed it down as much as possible, so anyone could understand. His simplistic promises were made to order for his political base. Hitler promised more prosperity and expanded borders for more room in which to live, or again, Lebensraum. Now, fascism is perceived as a strong movement with simple answers for complicated problems. Hitler was giving simple answers and simple solutions, exactly what people wanted to hear, because that gave them hope that their situation would change soon, not in 10 years, but now. Hitler blamed Germany's problems on scapegoats like Jews and communists. Fears that the communist revolution in Russia would spread to Germany, people began singing Deutschland über alles, Germany over the world. They trusted Hitler to take them there. In 1932, the Nazi Party only won about a third of the seats in parliament, but Hitler still managed to take power. Hitler put together a ruling coalition, partnering with conventional conservative politicians who figured they could control him. After struggling to find an alternative government, Paul von Hindenburg reluctantly appointed Hitler Chancellor of Germany in 1933. It was the only way that Hindenburg could form a government with a parliamentary majority. Suddenly, Hitler became the head of the new German government. And we'll pick up with what he did with that power in the next section of the lecture.